happily the founder and faculty director of the Kelly Writers House. How many of you people out there like the Kelly Writers House? All right. That makes me happy. Yeah, so, and this is Alumni Day. And now, how many of you are here because, not just because of Anthony DeCurtis, about him in a moment, more, but you're here because you have a reunion year. Anybody with a reunion year? Okay. Anybody? Mitch, did you raise your hand because it's a reunion year? Reunion. What is it? 45. 45. All right. That's good. Anybody got more than 45? Mitchell, I'm really sorry. 45 years. Okay. For those of you who have a 10, 15, 20, congrats. I don't know what you say to somebody who's now 5 years older, but congratulations to everybody. And to Mitchell Blutt, 45 years. One more time, Mitchell Blutt. Mitchell Blutt has a close connection to our honoree. Mitchell and Margot have supported our Blutt Symposium all these years. How many years? 17. What? Who was the first? Was it Roseanne Cash? Roseanne Cash, 17 years ago. Oh, boy. And Lou Reed? Patti Smith? Graham Nash? Oh, my gosh. Yeah. That's amazing. Francesca here? Where's Francesca? Francesca, who is... So Francesca was how old when Graham Nash was here? Was just middle school? And she sat in the first row in the old Arts Cafe, not this fancy new Arts Cafe. In the old one, sat in the first row, and Graham Nash got a sense that she was sort of paying attention, sort of not. And he decided, there she is, Francesca. So we're celebrating your dad. You're supposed to sit next to your dad. Okay, I want to tell you a secret about Francesca. It's not really a secret. That is, Francesca is a member, brace yourself, of the Penn class of 2027. Francesca will be entering the new class, and she has a really, really talented, devoted faculty advisor. And how old is this making us feel, Anthony? The, Yeah. Well, there's going to be more of that now. Okay. Anyway, Francesca was sitting in the first row. Graham Nash was playing. He noticed that she wasn't really paying attention. So near the encore, sorry, Francesca, I'm telling you. So, near the encore, he decided. I think Annie said, "Would you be willing to play one more song?" He had this really old beat-up guitar, acoustic guitar, and he played "Teach Your Children," which I was not expecting, and in good voice. And he said to Francesca, "This is for you." And he played "Teach Your Children" for Francesca, who was 2 feet away. I was sitting over there. And my wife Jane was in the back, and we looked at each other, tears coming down. I mean, we were. Thank you, Mitchell and Margot. Thank you, Anthony, for giving that experience to all of us. Okay, we are here to celebrate Anthony DeCurtis, who now has taught in our program, who's been part of the community of the Kelly Writers House and the creative writing program for 20 years. 20 years, 2-0, Anthony DeCurtis, 20 years. All right. So months and months ago, we thought of this idea, and oh, I see Cecilia's parents. Does that mean Cecilia's here also? No, it never means that. Okay. Just checking in. Oh, my goodness. What a family. I mean, our family, not your family. So we thought, you know what? Let's celebrate. Let's do something for Alumni Day, and let's bring back a lot of Anthony's former students. And we thought, okay, who can we get to be ringleaders? And, of course, I don't know about how, of course, but it turned out that Allie Jaffe Ramis, whom I think of as Allie Jaffe, but Allie Jaffe Ramis, and Hillary Reinsberg, and Nina Walpo Roseborough, We got together on a Zoom meeting. We decided let's coordinate. And so in a minute, when I give the microphone away, and it seems to be a problem for me giving this microphone away, I'm talking too much. Allie first, I believe, and Hillary will come up, and they're going to tell you how this thing is going to be organized, and it's going to feature former students. So it's like kind of, this is your life. This is your life. This is your life. We didn't bring back your third grade teacher, Mrs. McGillicuddy, but just about everybody else. Sister McGillicuddy. That's right. Nina, who is the part of the triumvirate, kind of something got in the way. His name is Hugh. He's adorable. He's little. And so she is taking care of Hugh today, so she couldn't be here. So regards. And I think she's watching on a live stream. So I want everybody to turn around. Zach, which camera is working for right now? That one? Oh. Okay, so it's pointing to you. You don't have to turn around. All right? On the count of 3, you're going to say, hello, Hugh, thank you, Nina. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, Hugh, thank you, Nina.
And thank you all for coming. There's beer and wine and what to eat. And I believe at the end of this program, we're going to have even more yummy food. Is that correct? Jessica Lowenthal, where are you? Will you stand in the Arts Cafe because there's something I want to say about you? So stay after. Don't just sit here like it's a regular Penn event where you sit and you're shooed out. You sit, you participate, and then you eat and drink and hang out, okay? All right, before I turn it over to Allie, I just want to say that Jessica Lowenthal, the director of the Kelly Writers House, has really kind of overseen the coordination of all this and deserves our appreciation. Okay. All right. And now you're going to put your hands together for Allie and Hillary. Come on up, you guys.
Okay. Hi, guys.
Hi. I also just want to say there's like 4 seats in the second row if anyone wants to come up.
Come on in.
Let's take a moment. There's Cecilia. Hi. Fill up this. Thank you. You're good at this. This is something that. Come in.
Yeah, Alex.
Living room. Cool. No, it says reserved. Just sit right on the reserve side. You're good. All right. Thank you, Allie. That was fun.
Or Hillary.
There's 2 more.
There's more. Here's another one. Pizza.
Okay. Great. Nice. Okay. So Hillary and I are so happy to be honoring Anthony DeCurtis today. In his 20 years at Penn, he's taught hundreds of students. For many of us, he's remained a mentor and a friend in our lives long after we graduate from Penn. In addition to being a beloved teacher, Anthony is the author of Lou Reed: A Life, In Other Words, Artists Talk About Life and Work, and Rocking My Life Away, Writing About Music and Other Matters. He co-wrote the New York Times bestselling The Soundtrack of Our Lives, Clive Davis's autobiography, and is also the winner of a Grammy in the Best Album Notes category for his essay accompanying Eric Clapton's Crossroads. He is one of the most respected music journalists of our time.
Anthony is really a one-man pop culture journalism school at Penn. If you were ever impressed by 34th Street Magazine and the features that came out of there, it's because all of the students were taking Anthony's class. For so many of us, he made journalism cool and exciting and deeply connected to real-world culture.
He has disciples and followers among us. He not only taught us so well, but also identified great people. He's the ultimate connector. And he put us in touch with people we'd find interesting, people that we stayed friends with long after we left Penn.
Allie and I are actually a great example of a DeCurtis connection. I'll explain how we know each other so well. So Allie and I re-met about 2 years ago when I started dating her best friend. But when I heard the name Allie Jaffe, I thought, hey, I think I know her. But how exactly, I was trying to remember. And Allie reminded me that we had been introduced through Anthony about 10 years ago. When I was just about 3 years out of school, Anthony had generously invited me to come speak to his class about my fledgling journalism career and experience in the digital media world. Afterwards, we went for the requisite 5 p.m. white dog dirty martini meal. Many of you know it well. He asked if he could invite a most promising student, a senior who had taken his course in years past, to come meet us. He just seemed to have a hunch that we'd get along and would have a lot to talk about. Of course, he was right. It only took us a decade to realize that.
And something special about Anthony is that he empowered us to see the skills that he taught us in the classroom as transferable to so many different cool careers that weren't necessarily straight up journalism. Hillary and I are both examples. For me, every good thing that has ever happened in my career has happened because of Anthony. It's completely true. I took my first class with him my sophomore year. That summer, when I applied to hundreds of internships, had not gotten a single one. I was planning to waitress like I had done a previous summer. Anthony called me out of the blue and said that Rolling Stone needed one more intern. Was I interested in interviewing? That internship changed my life and my career path because someone I met there helped me get an internship at the New York Times the next summer. And then a few years later, Stephen Colbert was starting a new late night show. Someone reached out to Anthony, who had been a guest on the Colbert Report, to recommend young people for an assistant job. He put me up for it, and 8 years later, now a producer at the show, which has been just a dream job in a million ways, I can't even begin to express my gratitude to Anthony. But in addition to those amazing, it is the decade plus of mentorship and friendship, talking about work and life over breakfast before work, and countless dirty martinis after, that means the most to me. He's always a teacher, whether in the classroom, in the Kelly Writers House, or in a diner on the Upper West Side, and I continue to learn so much from him. So,
I personally signed up for Anthony's class in my freshman year, fresh out of an oddly discouraging high school newspaper experience. Weirdly intense. That left me questioning if I really had the chops to make it as a writer or editor. And that whole thing was a story for another time. But Anthony's class and the support of the Writers' House in general quickly turned that around. And my writing and editing career really was formed and shaped during that time. And Anthony's support through my years were really formative. But the magic beyond that is that we've stayed in touch and we've now known each other for 15 years. And coming back to talk to Anthony's students, which I've done many years, is often a highlight of the year, and really a connection to the power of the Writers' House and the amazing community here. So we're so happy to introduce some old friends and new friends who I think feel really similarly about Anthony and about the Writers' House in general and this amazing community. So we will introduce our first speaker. I think we have 8 speakers today, all of them former students, all out in the world doing amazing things. We have students from all different years who are all going to be sharing different insights, stories, reading pieces, really fun mix. So we'll start off with Julia Rubin, who is the editorial director for culture and features at Vox. She launched The Goods in 2018 and was previously the executive editor of Racked, where she originated the site's long-form program. Prior to joining Vox Media, Julia was a features editor at Teen Vogue. I personally met Julia when she was my boss at 34th Street Magazine. I convinced her to take Anthony's class. She was then my co-conspirator in launching the Under the Button blog, then my co-worker at our first post-college jobs, and now my dear friend of many, many years. And she'll speak about how Anthony's class helped her envision the possibility of being a real-world writer.
Thank you, guys. I'm a little short, so I think you'll sense some themes throughout the night. So I'm going to start with how I start talking to Anthony's classes, which I am now so lucky to speak at. I always wanted to be a writer. It is what I would answer on elementary school exercises, asking what I wanted to be when I grew up. I started a 5th grade newspaper. I was the editor-in-chief of my high school paper. But kind of similar to Hillary, I had a really depressing internship at a local publication right before I started Penn. And I was like, there's no way I can make a career out of journalism. Like, this is not for me. This is really unpleasant. Despite that, I joined 34th Street basically my first day on campus. I loved it. I met so many of the people here tonight through Street, including Hillary, who indeed recommended that I take Anthony's class. That class is what really helped me see the viability of being a professional writer, even as the industry was rapidly changing. I always say I entered in '06 and I graduated in 2010, and that is just like a wild period within the journalism industry where basically when I graduated, you could work on the internet. That was certainly not really a thing when I entered. So that was quite exciting. And I learned so much from hearing about Anthony's experiences and also the experiences of the many other practicing journalists that he brought in to talk to us. The class really allowed me to write the kinds of things I hoped to and later did write once I entered the field. Critical essays, reported features, stuff that was fun and had a perspective that took a really broad view of what we consider culture. And I loved the class so much that I took the advanced version the next year. So it was in that class that Anthony taught me that I could write long form, big magazine features. And that really became a North Star for me professionally. I loved immersing myself in a world, being a participant observer. I loved attempting to write with style and not just efficiency. And it really gave me confidence in what I could be like as a journalist. Fast forward a few years, after putting in my dues in the blog mines, I was able to emerge a features editor and could write and edit big pieces. And that resulting work is among what I'm the most proud of in the last dozen years. It's also the work that I talk about when I talk to Anthony's students, because as I said, I got to become one of those practicing journalists that hopefully show the next generation what is possible. Anthony is the type of professor you always hope you'll have: inspiring, engaging, empathetic, curious, kind, deeply invested in his students long after they've left the classroom. And those students also feel his impact long after too, as evidenced by today. In fact, I still think about the big piece I wrote for his advanced class often and what I could do with it now. I think it has some life in it yet, and Anthony is the reason why. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So next up, we have Joe Pinsker. He's the class of 2013. He is a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, where he covers the pursuit of happiness for the paper's personal finance section. Previously, he was a staff writer at The Atlantic magazine, where he covered business and economics, and then families and parenting. At Penn, Joe took 2 arts and culture writing classes with Anthony and wrote his honors thesis about how musicians in Philadelphia make a living under Anthony's guidance. Joe and I were actually interns together at Rolling Stone. He got the Real Arts internship that year. And it's been so cool to see him continue a career in journalism through the country's most prestigious publications. So come on up, Joe.
Hello. I am honored to be here today toasting Anthony. Anthony was a central part of my time here at Penn and also of the foundation of my career as a writer. The first class that I took with Anthony was the arts and popular culture, and the very first essay I wrote for him was me gushing about a song by Bon Iver, which I can explain by pointing out that it was 2010 and I was 19 years old. So I recently dug up a printout of that essay, and I reread the note that Anthony left at the bottom. He said, quote, "Email me a copy of this and I'll send it to a friend who will forward it to Justin." As in Justin Vernon, the guy who started Bon Iver. That was the first gesture of support of many that Anthony gave me and so many others here as we were starting to find our way in the world of writing. something that I didn't realize in college, but that I was struck by once I was in journalism, was how similar the discussions that we had in Anthony's classes were to the work of real-world writers and editors. The detailed conversations that we had about word choice and about the most elegant way to structure a piece were just the same ones that play out daily in newsrooms and in magazine offices. So one of the gifts that Anthony gave us was not just leading these discussions, but treating us as genuine conversation partners. He'd ask us what we thought about something, and he'd actually listen. Another aspect of my gratitude to Anthony is about what his classes signified on this particular campus. Penn can be a confusing place to try to figure out what to do with the rest of your life, where classmates who otherwise seem normal all of a sudden start walking around campus in suits on their way to interview with consulting firms. And Anthony's classroom upstairs, for me, just exerted a powerful pull in the opposite direction. It was a place where the idea of having a career as a writer or an editor was taken seriously. The stream of professional journalists that Anthony brought in for classroom talks showed us that there were people out there who made a living being obsessed with the same sorts of things we were. I'm also grateful on an even more personal level for the work Anthony has put into developing the Real Arts program here, and particularly the internship that he helped establish at Rolling Stone, which is where I spent the summer of 2012 learning how a national magazine is made, getting to know editors, and one time escorting the rapper Rick Ross into the building. That was my first real-world journalism gig, and I'm honestly not totally sure what I'd be doing today if Penn didn't have a program like that, or for that matter, a place on campus like this where we're all today. So through all of this, the classes, the career guidance, Anthony has been supportive and so kind in classroom discussions, and especially when I was working with him on my thesis, I appreciated his ability to push back on ideas and express skepticism while still maintaining that supportiveness. He has a way of guiding you in the right direction without making you feel like you were going in the wrong one. I was reminded of that recently when I read through all of the notes that Anthony actually wrote on the pieces that I submitted for his class when I was a sophomore. I saw where he was gently questioning in ways that would help me grow as a thinker and a writer. In his sentence level revisions on my papers, I could see in retrospect, they helped me develop an ear for how lines should flow and how phrases should connect. If there's one complaint I have about the feedback that Anthony gave me, it's that he was too encouraging of my enthusiasm for puns and wordplay in works of criticism, which I now find slightly embarrassing. One essay that I wrote about a memoir by the writer Rob Sheffield, I titled Chef Field of Dreams. And Anthony wrote, nice. Another about A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles mock documentary, I titled Mock and Roll. And Anthony wrote, nice. And for an essay critiquing aspects of the music review website Pitchfork, I chose the title, What the Fork? Anthony actually didn't write anything next to that last one, but I probably took that as a sign of silent approval. Anthony, I am deeply grateful for your support and your encouragement, even when I might have been making you groan a little. Thank you for everything, and here's to you.
All right, next up we have Grace Ambrose. Grace lives in Kansas City, Missouri, where she is a co-founder of the city's first mobile syringe exchange. She was previously coordinator of Maximum Rocknroll, the world's longest continuously published punk periodical. She runs the Thrilling Living record label and is the editor of the forthcoming book Kleenex /LiLiPUT about the seminal Swiss band of the same name. If that makes you think Grace sounds really cool, I can confirm Grace was probably the coolest person I knew at Penn. She's always aware of the most interesting things happening in music, underground culture, and more. She was also always an incredibly generous colleague in our work at 34th Street and in classes, and I know so many other Kelly Writers House folks would say the same. So welcome up, Grace.
I hope there will be some dirty martinis at the reception later, Jessica. So thank you, Hillary. I'm so happy to be here. So when a famous musician dies, two things always happen immediately. I get a news alert on my phone, followed instantaneously by a text from one of my parents that says, Anthony is on TV, or Anthony is on the radio. They always text me this, even though I'm usually several hundred, if not several thousand miles away with different radio stations, never by a television. He's certainly the only professor of mine whom my parents still know the name of, and maybe the only professor that they ever knew the name of. And I know that some of that is because they are sure that he is the key to them finally meeting and befriending Bruce Springsteen. But no small part of it is certainly because of the impact his teaching and mentorship had on me. When I think back on my time at Penn, I'm amazed by, and it might seem obvious to all the old people in this room now, how fucking young we were. We were like children. Being an undergraduate, you are practically neonatal. And that's not to say that young people aren't brilliant and creative and capable and visionary, but more so that you really are not fully formed yet. And college is as much about learning how to be a person in the world as it is about learning how to be a writer or a painter or, God forbid, a consultant. And for me, one of the best parts about going to Penn was that it was right in the middle of Philadelphia, so I could cultivate a relationship to the art and music scenes that existed here fully outside the university. The connections and friendships and creative partnerships I developed in those contexts laid the foundation for the trajectory of my life. Anthony understands his students not just as individuals learning to be writers or painters or consultants, but as people. Part of what distinguished Anthony as a professor was this ability to see his students, including myself, as three-dimensional, curious young people with lives and personalities and interests outside of the classroom, with an always generous and patient and respectful understanding of those not yet fully formed but still fully forming humans. I remember sitting around the dining table here at the Kelly Writers House having dinner with Patti Smith. I mean, that's a crazy sentence. Like, this place is amazing. I was 20 years old and I was having dinner with Patti Smith. I was seated right next to her, like so close. And we were all going around, this is dinner, and you go around the table and you're introducing yourself and you're saying why you're there. And so it's a table full of, hotshot professors and critics and writers and Anthony and Patti Smith. And I think I said something like, my name is Grace, I'm a senior in the college, and I'm one of Anthony's students. And that was it. I was just so happy to be there. I was stunned to be there, That was it. And Anthony stepped in and gave the most generous introduction of me. So generous and so kind that I felt like I blacked out during it. Despite the fact that we only saw each other for 3 hours a week, he had an understanding of the work that I was doing in the world. In that moment, he situated my work, the work of playing rock and roll music and organizing shows and events and putting out records and living in a city, in a broader context that I hadn't yet seen it in. And it was his priority to make sure that Patti Smith, of all people, understood how I fit into that broader context and why I had a seat at that table. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And I still strive to extend the same generosity of spirit to all the people around me. I have particularly fond memories of the Advanced Projects Seminar, which was sort of an improvisatory workshop upstairs in the back room of the Writers' House here. And that class was really driven by the students and the projects that we chose. In that context, I saw that I wasn't alone in my experience. Anthony chose to see the whole picture of each of his students, the understanding of what went on in our lives outside the Kelly Writers' House walls. The class was, of course, oriented around a final piece of writing, but that piece of writing was sort of besides the point. I mean, I know there was a syllabus because I think you have to have a syllabus for a class, and I assume I got a grade, but the whole thing was so joyfully oriented around process and discussion and the generous exchange of ideas, so driven and led by our needs of the day and the conversations we were having. It was a liberating change even from other writing and art classes I was taking here. It was a commitment to making a space for exploration and sustained engagement and meaningful production without the manufactured stress and deadlines and cultivated urgency of most college courses. And it was fun and challenging And it produced some really, really good writing in an environment that I think many of us have yet to encounter since. I live in Kansas City, Missouri now, and I was telling some people why I was coming back out east, and they were surprised. They're like, "You're flying out to do what? You still think about a professor that you had 15 years ago?" It's easy to take these special relationships and special places like Anthony and the Kelly Writers House for granted. So many people have nothing like this ever in their lives. And here we are in a room full of people who have all been touched by Anthony's intellect and thoughtfulness. It was so easy for me to say yes, immediately yes, when Jessica asked if I would come to Philadelphia for this event. And then the joy I felt when I saw the list of other speakers. Some of my very favorite collaborators from 34th Street are here. Like I was like, oh my God, fuck yes, this is like the best group of people I could imagine. And of course, it's the kind of curious, generous, innovative, intelligent people who Anthony attracts. There's a handful of us here today, but there could be dozens and dozens. Like the list of people that would be so excited to come and talk about Anthony's legacy and generosity is miles long. We're all so fortunate to have been recipients of the gifts of your time and thoughtfulness in the classroom, at the many fabulous events here in this room, and in the years since graduation. Thank you, Anthony. It has been a real pleasure.
Wow. Hillary and I were just saying these are all so amazing. Okay, no pressure to everyone else. So next we have Greg Mon, class of 2005, lives here in Philly, where he founded and ran a glorified clown college / performance venue called the Philly Improv Theater for 17 years. Since stepping back from that work day to day in 2020, he now enjoys attending theater without worrying about what's going on behind the scenes, which sounds nice. Greg was in Anthony's very first class that he taught at Penn, so it's really special to have you here. We're so happy. And he's kept up a friendship with Anthony ever since. This is he took a really novel approach to this speaking assignment that I'm personally really excited to hear, so I will let you take the floor.
Oh. Hello. Prepare to be sorely disappointed after that massive wind-up. So, yeah, I'm the guy that created an improv theater after taking a writing class, and I don't know what that says about how much I enjoyed writing. But it genuinely does say that the course of Anthony's class changed my life, and I'll touch on that. And I'm going to improvise a little bit right now, so I'm also going to take my phone out and just start a timer, because that's something my wife would tell me I need. So I just want to say something about the Writers' House first. It's alumni weekend. People are wandering around the campus here. I see all these folks like pointing up at tiny, high-up windows that only they can see, going, "I lived there!" And every time I come to campus with friends, I don't do that. I walk past this building, and I point at it, and I say, "That's the Kelly Writers' House. That was my home at Penn." This building has meant so much to me and so many other people. And we're at the point in this where you're going to start getting things that are repetitive. But in an environment where so many people are thinking about going to law school because they disappointed their parents by not liking the sight of blood and not wanting to become doctors. And they are not going, they didn't buy a suit that fit well, so they don't have a job at Goldman for the summer. It was really important to me that I found this place, and I really figured out that I didn't have to succumb to the pressure of being a senator or a lawyer. I could be a creative person. I could have a creative life. And Anthony's class, that was the reason I walked up this winding little path and came into this building and sat upstairs and had class here in 2002 and discovered that you could be a creative person. And so, Anthony, for taking me into your class, which I wheedled my way into. The class was full, and I very persistently and politely wrote Anthony many times asking if anyone had dropped out. And I remember, and this I'll date myself, coming back to my dorm room where I had a landline that I paid the university to put in for me. And I had a voice message, and it was Anthony DeCurtis. And he went, "Hey, this is Anthony DeCurtis at Rolling Stone magazine, and there's a spot that's opened up." And it felt for me like I was William Miller and he was Ben Fong-Torres in Almost Famous. I had been a kid that grew up in a house with basically all classical music. I believed that popular music had stopped being published when the Beatles broke up. And I got to campus, and my act of rebellion was to decide I wanted to take like a rock class. And I showed up and did a kind of bad job, because one of my first assignments for Anthony was we were all supposed to write about our favorite song. And man, I brought him in 5 awesome pages on George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And everybody else in that class looked at me like, what planet is he from? So over the years, I've been able to come back and speak in Anthony's class. We've stayed in touch. I've randomly shown up when like fancy, exciting things were happening for you, and just been like, hey, I saw like something great happened. Here's a bottle of wine. And Anthony's always called me back kind of when I'm at a crossroads. I started a theater company, and I worried about whether or not I was really doing the best possible thing with my life. And then Anthony said, hey, come speak to my class. And I felt great. And then, you know, the theater was going okay. Maybe we'd hit a rough patch, and Anthony invited me back, and I thought, wow, this is such an uplifting thing. And the 2 talks I did here, which were panels of comedy writers, I think tell a very quick, succinct story. The first was called The Serious Side of Comedy Writing, when I was trying to give purpose to my life. And the second was called Disappointing Your Parents. And so with that in mind, I'll call the couple of minutes I'm going to spend right now, what have we learned? So Anthony's first class was called Writing About the Arts, and that course was many things, and you're going to hear about all the things Anthony's courses were, but to me it was really a master class in interviewing. And so when I was asked to do something here, I showed up at another event Anthony was having this spring, and I said to him, hey, what if I interview you over email and share some answers to questions, because that's what the class was supposed to be about. And I'm a little rusty, but I had some questions I wanted to ask Anthony. And we made one condition on this that I set, which was we'd do it over email, and any question that Anthony didn't answer within 60 minutes, I would get to answer for him. So I'm going to share this very brief interview with you now, lightly edited for clarity and brevity, and then occasionally fantastically invented to possibly for embarrassment or cancellation. And I want your help, so we're going to do a practice. But after each of these answers, I want you collectively to either shout truth or lies. And I want you to do it loudly and lustily. So the first 2 I'll set up for you. The first answer is true, and so you can all shout truth. And the second answer is a lie, and you can all shout lies. So here are the first 2 questions. Off the top of your head, what's your first memory of the Kelly Writers House? And Anthony wrote, walking in to do my first talk there before I started teaching at Penn. True. Okay, that's okay. You'll be louder when you say lies in a minute. I promise. What, in your opinion, is the greatest pop song of all time? Psy's Gangnam Style. Lies. I wonder why you all shouted lies louder for that. Okay, so here are a few questions I asked Anthony and a few answers he gave, and you'll tell me whether you think they're real. Do you remember how you first came to teach at Penn? David Wallace, who was the chair of the English department at the time, invited me to give a talk on writing about music and popular culture. I'd met him 10 years before through a mutual friend, and we'd gone out in New York to hear Moroccan trance music and gotten very drunk afterwards. That he contacted me out of the blue after all that time suggested that he might be giving me the once-over, which it turns out he was. True. Yeah, a story about Anthony, good music, and good drinks. Your class focuses on art criticism. Is there a hallmark of good criticism that makes it more than just judgment of someone else's effort? No. My success as a critic is something I measure by the number of teary and or threatening voicemails I receive from musicians after I call their work an insult to the hearing community. Lies. Anthony got back late, and we can argue about whether that's true or not. He wrote, the quality of writing and depth of your thought. Both are far more important than whether you think something is good or bad. When you started teaching, you were not a father. And Francesca's here now. Now you're about to send your daughter off to college. Did you experience fatherhood in a way that changed what you felt about teaching or what you wanted to do in the classroom? There was a spring when I was first offering my single artist seminar classes where I briefly considered choosing Australian children's performers The Wiggles. Crazy, I know, but their output is tremendous, multiple albums a year. They've had a Van Halen-esque myriad of lineup changes, many of them messy. And the music draws tons of inspiration from 50s and 60s pop and folk music. Ultimately, I went with Bob Dylan. Split the room, that's false. What was the most bizarre piece of writing a student wanted to do for you? Out of the blue, a Penn student whom I didn't know and who was enrolled in an interdisciplinary program at the school sent me an email asking if I would direct her senior thesis, which was a fictional story about a student who worked her way through college as a call girl. The student wasn't living in Philadelphia, so we communicated completely remotely. We never met, and I have no idea what she looked like. This was pre-Zoom, pre-Skype, and I don't remember speaking with her over the phone, although we probably did. I read her proposal and her writing samples, agreed to do it. She wrote very well and was extremely responsible, turned all her work in, including revisions, on time. Parts of the thesis were very explicit, and she seemed to have clear ideas about how such an extracurricular arrangement might work, as well as its potential complications. It was quite possibly the strangest working relationship I've ever had. But she did a great job and quite deservedly received an A. True. And I wrote back to Anthony on that one. I went, wow. This is my last one. You've now taught a generation of writers. That's true, 20 years, a generation of writers. There are hundreds of us out in the world all doing interesting things. What did you hope to impart when you started, and how has it changed? My aims have mostly remained the same: to encourage students to write and think creatively and to try to find ways to bring that creativity into the world. Obviously, fewer traditional writing and editorial jobs are available these days, but people now have infinite opportunities to express themselves online and elsewhere. I want my classes to inspire people to stay alert, to comprehend the culture that surrounds them, and to engage with it with their best ideas and best, truest selves. True, so true. And I hope, Anthony, that you agree that when you look around this room, you look at us sharing here today, that you've really succeeded in that mission. Thank you.
Up next, we have Gwen Lewis. Gwen is a West Philly native and graduate of the college class of 2014. Working at the intersection of technology and entertainment, she's built product experiences for Comcast, NBC Universal, Google, and Disney. She also writes creative nonfiction and teaches yoga to West Philadelphians. As we were planning for this event, everyone at the Writers' House was just absolutely raving about Gwen and really speaking to her contributions to the Writers' House and the Philly communities. So we're so lucky to have her here.
Hi. I'm tall because I have heels on, not because I'm tall. So, hi everyone. Like all of us, I learned and fell in love with the art of profile writing in Anthony's class. And exactly 9 years ago, when I graduated, the Penn admissions office asked me if I would write a profile about a certain professor that I was known for raving about around campus for the Penn Provost website. And when I was thinking about what to do today, I was like, I might read excerpts from that because Anthony taught me how to do it. And when I read it so many years later, it's still pretty good. Promise this won't take long. Okay. At 1:30 p.m. on a Thursday, a creative writing seminar is starting on the second floor of the Kelly Writers' House. After handing back students' writing about a photograph assignments, the professor brings up the first topic of discussion. That live tweeting thing. Do we want to do that? I would love to do it, calls out one student. Next to her, another buried his face in his hands and mumbled something about Twitter accounts and the word mainstream. The assignment is to live tweet the Academy Awards together as a class. The students are to comment on what people wear, who wins big awards, and anything hilarious and stupid that happens. The end goal is not to waste time on social media, but to create an aggregated collection of information in order to write a critical essay on the 2014 Academy Awards. It will be community building. It will also be a form of note-taking. It creates conversation, says Professor DeCurtis, or Anthony, as the students call him. Then, he continues, you'll be sitting down and writing an essay about a whole range of topics, fashion, the awards themselves. The seminar is called The Arts and Popular Culture. The professor is an author, music critic, and contributing editor to Rolling Stone. It's 2014. Twitter posts are 140 characters of culturally relevant commentary, and journalists need to learn how to craft pieces about things like the Oscars as much as the news. DeCurtis won a Grammy for album notes. He co-wrote Clive Davis's memoir. He has interviewed and written about celebrities ranging from Prince to Paul McCartney, and for the past 12 years, he has shared his craft with students at UPenn. One of my favorite things to say when someone comes up with an idea is, that sounds like school. I'm aware that this is a school, but I want people to bring their lives into the classroom, says DeCurtis. Skipping ahead a little bit. Putting 2 elbows onto the table, leaning on the front legs of the chair, DeCurtis begins his interview talk about important stuff, like how not to ruin the thing, but he doesn't mean to sound glib. He tells the students to feel comfortable. I want these interviews done in person, he says. You have to think about this as an interaction with a person. This is still a Thursday afternoon, and that person is still in whatever mood they're in. He takes questions. What if we end up with a jerk, someone asks. Do we let that jerkness come through in the piece? Absolutely, DeCurtis says. That's the writer's revenge. The class laughs. He advises students to spend as much time with their subjects as possible, to observe the interviewee in their natural habitat, to take notes, but also to be sure to record the interview. Not afraid to reveal his own mistakes, DeCurtis draws from personal experience to illustrate what can happen when you have to rely on notes and memory alone. I wrote a story about Morgan Freeman, he begins. It was a while back, an early profile. Students gasp and poise their pens for note-taking. In addition to offering students a unique experience in the classroom, DeCurtis works to help shape students' lives after they graduate. For the second half of each class, he brings a professional to share their career experience and to answer questions from the students. Besides journalists as traditionally defined, guests have included staff from BuzzFeed, Teen Vogue, and recently the director of 20 Feet from Stardom, which was nominated for an Oscar. I want to give a real-world point of view with the guests who are doing writing-related fields. If you like writing, you might like writing in television. You don't have to get out of here and lock yourself in an attic and write a novel, says DeCurtis. Over the years, Anthony DeCurtis has even been able to bring back former UPenn students who are establishing their careers. When I was reading that final line, it kind of gave me goosebumps to think about how almost 10 years later, I'm now a part of this amazing lineup of UPenn students that he brought back, and we're all establishing our careers. And I think that's such a testament to the impact he had on us as students and has on us now. Speaking of post-graduation, he gave me 2 quick pieces of advice that he probably doesn't even remember he says, but that I think about all the time. The first is, if the job is making you unhappy, you have to find a way to leave. I don't care if it's only been 6 months. Al had told me something like, do 1 to 3 years, that looks good on your resume. And Anthony was like, I don't care if it's been 6 months, you have to leave. And if you know me, that's funny because I have now quit a collection of some of the top roles at some of the biggest companies in the world when I feel like I've strayed too far from my love for art and culture, and I haven't regretted a single one of those times. Thank you. Secondly, far before the boom of influencers and creators and people who just make names for themselves, he told me to call myself what I want to be and just put my work into the world as such and let people discover it. That one is one that I'm still working on, but I will say that the writing that I did in Anthony's class gave me some of the most inspirational moments of my college career. It landed me a cover story in 34th Street, and I'm one of the only people here who didn't write for 34th Street. Allowing me to take the Real Arts internship at Surefire Media after my freshman year in college made my resume really impressive really quickly and allowed me to later intern at Google, which launched my career in technology and product development and entertainment companies. And I'm just so excited to continue to see where I end up with my work in the next 10 years and where everyone else ends up in theirs. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks, Gwen. So next up, we have Jessica Goodman, class of 2012, who is the New York Times bestselling author of young adult thrillers, They Wish They Were Us, They'll Never Catch Us, The Counselors, and The Legacies. She is the former op-ed editor at Cosmo Magazine, was part of the 2017 team that won a National Magazine Award in personal service. She has also held editorial positions at Entertainment Weekly and HuffPost, and her work has been published in outlets like Glamour, Condé Nast Traveler, The Cut, Elle, Bustle, and Marie Claire. She also happens to be one of my best friends. I met Jess in the first weeks of my freshman year at Penn. She single-handedly led me into the world of 34th Street and Anthony's class. Many years later, she also introduced me to my husband. So you can say that she is the most important connector in my life. And I've watched her achieve her dreams of becoming a best-selling novelist with so much pride and amazement. But long before that, she was just another student of Anthony's trying to break into the world of writing. So she will talk about how instrumental he has been in her path.
Thanks, Allie. That was very touching. Back when I entered Penn, it seemed like everybody that I met knew exactly what they wanted to do after college. Talking to the kids on my freshman hall, you'd think that there were only 4 professions in the whole world. And if you didn't intend to go through corporate recruiting, you would never find a job. No one knew that that was BS more than Anthony DeCurtis. I didn't learn about Anthony and his storied class until I joined 34th Street, but soon after I started writing articles and sitting in on meetings, it became clear to me that these people all had this like shaman that they worked with, and he was this kind of like cult leader who would guide everybody who was interested toward this path of following their creative endeavors. And I heard his name in passing, and it was always under the guise of like, have you taken DeCurtis yet? Wait, who came to DeCurtis' class this week? Wait, you haven't taken DeCurtis yet? You have to sign up for DeCurtis. It was like a noun that we all used. And I gathered that if you actually wanted to make a go of this whole nonfiction creative writing thing after graduation, you had to take his class. It was like an unofficial graduation requirement for all pop culture writer nerds. And that's not only because he brought in lauded writers, editors, and filmmakers as guests, or that his instruction was generous, technical, and constructive. It was also because he was one of the only people that I encountered at Penn who made me believe that we could actually take our love of TV and music and books and turn it into real-life skills that would enable us to have long, fulfilling careers, or at least get like a really fun internship. And when those guests came in, Anthony let us ask them whatever we wanted about working in media, even if that meant we were asking really obnoxious questions like, wait, so isn't this industry dying? And I like to think that he figured that if we saw people who had these kinds of professions, music writers, TV recappers, editors-in-chief, film critics, book bloggers, we might actually be able to envision ourselves stepping into those roles too. And if that's true, then he wasn't wrong. He famously organized the Real Arts internship at Rolling Stone, which I, like a bunch of us here, had. And when I was a junior, the summer after I was junior, and I consider that to be the real turning point in my professional life. It was the first time I worked in a real life newsroom. And it was also the summer that I got to organize pot brownies into baggies to give to all the editors for them to go to a U2 concert. So that was really fun. And I also did amazing things like get to sit in on really cool interviews and transcribe stuff and learn how magazines are made. And that was where I decided that I could actually see myself working in a similar environment upon graduation. And that was there where I met people who would make it happen. I also got to meet people who, upon learning that I knew Anthony, asked me a million questions about what it was like to learn from one of the greats. And my baseline answer was always better than you could ever imagine. While Penn can be a really competitive environment, Anthony often encouraged us to work together to help one another get positions and stories published, even after college. And he led by example, helping so many of my peers get their resumes seen, their pitches read, and their voices heard by connecting them with his vast network. Even after I graduated, Anthony would check in to see where I was working or if I needed any job leads. And once I became a little bit more experienced, he would reach out asking if I could recommend any recent grads for entry-level positions he'd heard about. He was always willing to help. And I think that is exemplified also by the fact that he was my reference for like everything in my life, probably until like I was mid-career. He was my reference for the Nora Prize, which I'm so thrilled to be a part of. He was my reference for all of my first and second and third and fourth job applications, even when it was like I was 5 years out and he had no idea what I was working on. But he was always willing to do it, which is like just speaks to how generous he was. But like landing the gig at Rolling Stone was a massive moment for me in my budding career. I considered myself actually made as a journalist when I got an email from Anthony asking me to come speak at his class as a guest. I showed up, excited to meet the eager students, and I wasn't the least bit surprised when they asked me questions like, wait, isn't this industry dying? And back in college, the answer we got was always something the lines of, maybe. And that was still true when I spoke to students, but I had one caveat to give. Not for you, not if you have Anthony in your corner.
As Ali said, these really are all so good. No one's on their phones. Everyone's like eyes on. It's rare and really telling. Up next, we have CECILIA Corrigan. Cecilia is a New York-based writer and performer. In addition to winning the Plonsker Prize in 2013 and being selected as Issue Project Room's 2016 Artist in Residence, she's also been commissioned by Bedlam Theater Company to write a new play for their forthcoming season. Her script, Tulum, is currently under option with Billy Porter's Icognegro Productions. Cecilia, who I knew at Penn, is just a really fantastic creative human who I'm always so excited whenever I ran into her in New York recently and was like, oh yeah, we'll see you at the Anthony event. And we were just so excited. And so happy she's here today.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, last time I was here was definitely pre-COVID, but I make the pilgrimage every so often. And when I was invited to participate in this, I already knew how important Anthony had been just to my experience at Penn. And, you know, I had such fond memories afterwards of visiting his class. But in writing about this, and it's like a little notey, so I'm sorry if it's inscrutable, I realized actually how much my experience with him was like really important to shifting my attitudes about like culture in general, and how also it made me feel like old because I realized how much things have changed in terms of culture since then. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the myth of high and low culture and how that existed when I started school and doesn't really anymore, in my opinion at least. So when I got to Penn, I was like a very serious child where I had been raised without cable, so I was like, you know, deprived of all the information about the sweet life of Zach and Cody, and instead I was given like a house full of books and Criterion Collection DVDs, so I was just, you know, totally neglected. And I'd absorbed like a love of 60s stalwarts like Dylan and Leonard Cohen from my hippie parents, which I know Anthony and I have in common, but I definitely didn't really have that much, I guess, honestly, respect for pop culture and like what I thought of as mainstream culture, because, you know, for all the younger people here, back then we had such a thing as like alternative culture and mainstream culture. And that's when I really realized like, oh, I'm old now. And, you know, we believed there was such a thing as like selling out. We still believed that there was like high and low. And in that whole divide, I definitely identified with the alternative. And I was thinking about like how pop culture has changed. And maybe maybe it wasn't as interesting in like 2006, or maybe I just was not paying attention. I mean, I was definitely wrong about a lot of things. Like I believed I'd grown out of my love for Natalie Imbruglia and it would never come back. Come on. I thought George W. Bush was the worst president we'd ever have. And I thought I'd be forever upgrading to better flip phones. And that Destiny's Child would be together forever. Respect. So another thing I was super wrong about was something I wrote about in Anthony's class, which was like a moment that happened on live TV during a benefit for Hurricane Katrina, when there was a live telecast and Mike Myers was hosting with Kanye West, and Kanye went off script and said George Bush doesn't care about black people. And I thought that was the most shocking thing Kanye was ever going to do. So before Anthony's class, I might not have looked at a moment like that as, something that would be possible for me to really look at in a serious way as a writer. But I think one of the things I realized was, like, as someone who now works so inside of the culture industry and like is, the class really introduced me to like my love and obsession with pop culture that now is like has basically consumed me as an entity, but not with giving up like serious intellectual inquiry, which was so important to me at 18. My perspective on what warranted serious consideration was broadened in Anthony's class, thanks not only to, as people have mentioned, like the very supportive environment where Anthony really created this atmosphere where it didn't feel like a lot of, great writers when they're professors, there's like a real kind of cult of charisma. And I feel like there was more of a cult of kindness around Anthony because it was just a very supportive and curious environment where he kind of let the students feel like they were teaching him as well. But I was also encouraged to think by Anthony's example with like respect and curiosity toward anything anyone brought into the room, including things that I might not have taken seriously in the past. So when I was reflecting on this, I realized how much, right. This is something that you might not remember saying, but I realized like it's become a guiding principle in kind of everything I do as an artist, which is, I can't remember what it was, but there was some prompt where you and I were talking about like, I was just being kind of a little snob about it or something. And Anthony said something like, the best place to start when you're thinking about something isn't about whether or not you like it, but it's about how to get closer to it. And that to me had like completely shifted my worldview, where so many of the things that inspire me now aren't necessarily the things that I think like I admire the most, but sometimes they're the things that bother me in culture. And then that ends up being like the most generative thing to think about. So thank you for that, Anthony. And thank you for guiding me through the gateway to the glory that is popular culture. I really loved it. Everything that I learned. Thanks.
Okay, our last speaker. So Alex Koppelman, class of 2005, was most recently a managing editor at CNN, where, among other things, he oversaw the media, tech, transportation, and consumer teams. He's also been an editor at places including The New Yorker, Guardian USA, where a series that he edited won prizes, including an Emmy and a National Magazine Award. He is also one of the people here who has known Anthony, like Greg, the longest, because Greg was in the first class, Alex was in Anthony's second ever class teaching, so we're so happy to have him close this out tonight.
Hi. So while we're talking about my age, and no, it's fine. I said earlier that every time I come down to Anthony's class, I'm like, this time you're not going to talk about how old being here makes you feel, and then every single time. Anyway, so, 19 years after I took the class, I was amazed when the email went out about this event, how many people I heard from saying, it's so cool you're speaking at this. I wish I could come. Anthony meant so much to me. I wasn't that shocked because I knew how connected so many people felt to him during his class and in the years after, and how he keeps in touch with people. But I did want to read part of one message I got. I'm not going to name who it is, in part because though her last name shouldn't be that hard to pronounce, I don't remember how to pronounce it. I'll tell you later. I so wish I could go. I truly love him. He was such a force for me, such an amazing mentor and teacher. Please give him my best when you see him, and tell him thank you for everything. So with that out of the way, I want to tell a story that actually will seem completely irrelevant to why we are here, which is to celebrate Anthony. But I promise at the end, it's going to all come back. I'm going to tie it up with a nice little bow because thanks to the education I got from Anthony and at the Kelly Writers House, I am just that good. So, on November 12th, 2010, I went on a first date to a bar in the East Village. I don't remember how it came up. I assume maybe one of us put him on the jukebox, or maybe it was just playing at the over the sound system. But I was talking with this woman about how much we both loved Prince, and date went really well. And so that night when I went home, I knew that Prince was playing about a month from them in mid-December of that year at the arena at the Meadowlands, and I went online and bought tickets, hoping that we would still be dating then, and figuring, worst case scenario, we break up, I still got tickets to Prince, it's fine. Turns out we were, in fact, still dating then, and I took her. Discovered that she had no rhythm, but ended up marrying her anyway. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not crediting Anthony with my marriage, both because we probably would have gotten married anyway, and also because even at an event to celebrate him, that would be a little weird. Nor am I crediting him with my 6-year-old son, whose favorite song when he was 2 was Purple Rain. I do have on my phone a video I will not be showing in order to protect his privacy and dignity of him in a high chair munching on a banana and tunelessly singing along to Purple Rain. However, at the reception afterward, I do accept cash and compliments about how cute he was. Again, I want to emphasize, I am not crediting Anthony with any of those things. That would be weird. But I do have a confession to make, which is that until my junior year of college, I wasn't actually that into Prince. I probably had a greatest hits album that I had downloaded off of LimeWire for like the actually surprising percentage of the room that probably still knows what that was. I definitely knew like Little Red Corvette in 1999 and blah, blah, blah. But, not that into him. And then I took Anthony's class in the fall of 2004. This is why I asked you earlier. And that spring, Prince came out with a new album called Musicology. And for Rolling Stone, one Anthony DeCurtis, with whom I had just taken a class, and who had helped me get an internship at that magazine. I think I was either the first or second person you helped get an internship there, which felt really special at the time, and now I've heard that. No, it's fine, though. It's fine. Also, I like how everybody else has really good stories. I once transcribed 14,000 words of an interview with Jimmy Buffett. And when I handed it to the guy who had done the interview and told him that it was 14,000 words of an interview with Jimmy Buffett, he said, and I bet 13,000 of them were boring. Anyway, in May of 2004, Anthony DeCurtis wrote a profile of Prince and the tour he was doing for Musicology, and also wrote a review of the album Musicology. And I remember reading them and saying, I think I need to go out and buy this album, and I think I need to get into Prince. And that's what I did. So I have brought with me to read a little bit from that review. And I'm going to sort of I didn't do a very good job of picking the excerpts. I'm going to try to just read a few paragraphs, but I will end on what is nicely the way Anthony ends the story, which is also something that I feel like I really learned about writing myself from Anthony. Starting somewhere in the early 90s. Oh, 4 stars, by the way. Starting somewhere in the early 90s, he seemed to disappear into his own bizarre obsessions. The metal jazz fusion spirituality of the Rainbow Children, 2001, and the instrumental meanderings of NEWS, 2003, being only the most recent excesses. But then, late last year, his election to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame made you remember just how potent, irresistible, and groundbreaking a force he once was. Then, his commanding performance with Beyoncé to open the Grammys proved that he could still thrill in such a high-pressure spot. And that solo on While My Guitar Gently Weeps at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, devastating. I'm going to pause here to say, yeah, if you haven't watched that on YouTube, go do that. Now comes Musicology, as appealing, focused, and straight up satisfying an album as Prince has made since Who Can Remember When. It's open, easygoing, and inclusive, the sort of album anyone might like. Most notably, Musicology restores a refreshing sense of songcraft to Prince's writing. Rather than seeming like mere sketches as so much of his recent work has, each track on the album is distinct, coherent, and rigorously uncluttered. Whether it's a bluesy lament such as On the Couch, a lovelorn meditation like A Million Days, or a stop-time jam such as If I Was the Man in Your Life. And the singer makes it clear that he has learned that rigor from the masters. Wish I had $1 for every time you say, don't you miss the feeling music gave you back in the day, he sings over an insinuating bass line on the title track. Then, like Arthur Conley calling out to the R&B pantheon in his 1967 hit Sweet Soul Music, Prince names names. Let's Groove, September, Earth, Wind and Fire, Hot Pants by James, Sly's Gonna Take You Higher. The fact that I married a woman without rhythm makes a lot of sense, as you can probably tell from me. Like half singing those lyrics is fine. Here we go. Finally, of all things, the album is a hymn to marriage. Not the frisky fantasy stuff of let's pretend we're married, but the real domestic deal. Did we remember to water the plants today, the singer asks on reflection, Musicology's closing song, finding the secret life of love in a quotidian detail? That's an example of how Prince, who claimed that musicology would take everyone back to school, is really the one who has understood an essential lesson. Less can be so much more.
Well, thank you to our speakers. That was so amazing. And we have one more person that we want to bring up here, which is the guy that is the reason we're all here. So, Anthony.
Wow. You know, I had known about it and looked forward to this event, for a while. And, but as it got closer, I found myself getting very self-conscious and kind of sort of nervous. But God, I've been so powerfully moved by so much of what was said, and there's so much I could say about what my experience here is. And let me start by thanking everyone, starting with Al and, Jessica and everyone else connected with the Kelly Writers House. But, how important a role this place has played in my own life, we struggle with community in this culture. There's such an emphasis on individuality, but, this place is a real community. And, I feel it every time I come in here. And so many of the experiences that were described sort of evoke that sense of community to me. I set out, when I was invited to teach a class here, I remember for about the first 6 weeks, I was thinking, like, why did I do this? I was just like, this is so hard. I mean, like, it's just like I'm reading the stuff and, so much of it is not very good. And I'm like, and, you still have to give your time to it. And after about 6 weeks, I thought, it's interesting. Wow, like this stuff is getting better. Like this stuff is, this is fun to read. And then it suddenly occurred to me, it's like, oh, teaching. Like, that's what you're here to do. Like, not to just tell like great anecdotes or, sort of hero stories from your career or even fun, embarrassing stories, but actually to get in there week after week, read people's work with them, and try to help them get better, and one of the ideas of that is and hearing the kind of range of things that people said today, and thank you all for speaking also, and thanks all of you for coming, is getting out of people's way. I don't necessarily know, what it is that I teach, but I feel that what I can help people do is become more of who they are and express more of who they are. And there's such a kind of sense at Penn, and I love teaching first-year students, especially, but there's such a sense at Penn of like, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? How does this work? And my answer to that is always, well, what do you want to do? And that's not just kind of a clever teacher line. It's always, I just say, look, I want to say yes to you. I want to say yes, so let's try to get this idea of yours to something that makes sense for what we're trying to do in this class, and then have at it. And I feel that when you do that with people, they take you to some great places. And I've always been suspicious, when teachers say, "Oh, I learn more from my students than they learn from me." I was like, "Man, that doesn't sound so exciting." I always wanted to learn from my own teachers, and so I won't, necessarily go that far, but like it is so much fun to see what people come up with. I just finished up a Beatles class right upstairs, and my students did like so many interesting things in there. Just came out like sort of providing Beatles. How would you even describe it? As kind of a score to rock climbing, and various kind of activities that you wouldn't necessarily think as you were sitting around thinking about the Beatles, that's what you would find. Anyway, that process of discovery is inspiring to me. It makes me think like, you need to think. I need to think. Yeah, I need to think the way that my students are thinking, freely, just have that experience. And, that's what I hope people take away, and, God, I could stand here and tell you stuff that, when everybody was talking about like the work that they did in this class, I remember so much of that stuff, and how proud I am of the work that they all did. And so anyway, I'm delighted to be continuing to do it. Delighted my daughter Francesca will be a Penn student in the fall. And delighted to keep trying to expand the community, that is this place. One thing I always say, and we have events, outside the Writers' House, trying to get people interested in supporting it. I always say, if somebody came to Penn and they never went to a single class, and all they did was come to the Writers' House every day for the events here, you would walk out of here with an amazing education, and I genuinely believe that, and I'm grateful for the role that I've been able to play in that. So anyway, thanks so much to everybody who's participated today, and thank you all for coming, and stick around a bit.
Anthony DeCurtis. Wow, we should do this every day. If you spoke and shared your reminiscences, would you just stand up so we can thank you and see you? Mostly in the front, turn around. And now, thank you. You guys were great. And now let's put our hands together for Allie and Hillary and Nina. So I don't know about the martini ingredients. We may have forgotten that, but everything's just short of that. So in the garden, there's beer and wine and lots of high top tables and also, tables with chairs, regular chairs around them. There's a tent. I don't know if it's probably not precipitating, so we're good. So we have the outside. We also have the dining room, which is set up so that kind of buffet style. So everything's to the side. There's a lot of food. It would be crazy to have such a good experience as this and then just go off somewhere, even though you have plenty of stuff to do. Stay here, hang out a little bit with Anthony and the rest of us. And I just want to say that there is a cake that has been decorated by Rebecca Donnell, and it says 20 years on it. And so if you want to go right past all the pepperoni and cheese and stuff right to the cake, you can do that, I think. So please stay, hang out, and then come back at the Writer's House, as Anthony recommended. You can probably get that education, come to Writer's House events without paying any tuition. So this could be the whole thing, and lunch, yes, exactly. So anyway, one more time, let us honor Anthony DeCurtis. Thank you all. Let's party. Come on.
Well, it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, baby. Even you don't know.